public nearby and those afar, and welcome to this doubtless very interesting council meeting. We'll just take a few moments to reflect on what we're going to do this evening and to rededicate ourselves to looking after those who put us here. Thank you, councillors. Please sit down. Item 1 is apologies for absence.
We have apologies from Councillor Liz Townsend, Councillor Philip Townsend, Councillor Deuce, Councillor Murray, Councillor Mirrlees and Councillor Earwaker, and I believe Councillor Steigers have joined us remotely.
Thank you very much indeed. Any declarations of interest? Any declaration of interest councillors wish to make now? Thank you very much. We'll move on to, there's nothing here for doing minutes. Right, the minutes are going to come to the next meeting. Fine. Announcements. I have a few short announcements. I've been to a few interesting things in the meantime, but the passion for seeing the mayor that was demonstrated earlier in the year seems to have died down a little. Perhaps they found out what a wonderful chap I am. Anyway, I went to the Repair Cafe in Farnham's 10th anniversary, which was an interesting one. And I went to a PSA, which is a cancer testing session in Godalming. I'm going through it quickly because you all want to get home quickly. I went to the Sport Godalming AGM, where I met the leader and the mayor of Godalming, and recently went to the installation of the High Sheriff, which is a very interesting ceremony. When they talk about choosing the High Sheriff, many of you will probably know he is pricked from a list. And for a long time, I thought they were mispronouncing picked until I looked it up and found he is actually pricked. But strangely enough, the bodkin used to prick his name always seems to go to the right place. So it's one of those randomness of life that isn't quite as random as we think. Anyway, enough from me. Leader, do you wish to make any quick announcements?
And yes, indeed. Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and they will be quick. Can I just begin by once again thanking our officers here at Waverley, also Guildford, but officers from other boroughs and districts of Surrey, and indeed Surrey County Council officers. The interim plan submissions for LGR were sent to the government on Friday as planned, and supplementary material has accompanied it from several sources. I'm also pleased to inform members that Guildford followed Waverley in clear support for 3 unitaries at their full council the day after ours. I also caught up on the audit committee and some of the debates elsewhere in the public over the course of the past couple of days, and just want to repeat to everybody here, one part of that debate is that no number of unitaries, 1, 2 or 3, can take on the debt in Woking, Spelthorne or anywhere else. They can't be incorporated with that debt attached. And I just want to remind any members who are talking about this, particularly in the public domain, that is the case. And there's no case of agreeing to take on Woking's debt by talking about working with Woking or indeed anywhere else. And I would certainly encourage those members who were talking about some of those things to remember where that debt came from and indeed why we're in this process. And certainly that's all I'm going to do on that for now. Members may also be aware that Waverley has hosted a new commonplace survey on behalf of the districts and boroughs to engage with residents on this subject, which I think as of now has already got 500 responses, and it only came online yesterday evening. I would urge members to share this with residents and community groups. I'm not sure if there's been a formal email round from comms yet, but I'll make sure that there is, so people have got the link. It is hosted on behalf of, I think, 8 of the 11 boroughs as of this evening. And is going to be almost certainly one of the few opportunities residents get to actually engage in this process at all, because of simply how rushed and how poor the process is. And on that, Mr. Mayor, that's all from me. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We will move on to questions from members of the public. I understand there is only one from, let me switch my glasses, from Mr. Colvin, who I don't believe is here. Since it's a short one, I will read the question so that it's on record. In light of SIL Regulations 65(7) giving WBC full discretionary powers to withdraw SIL liability notices for whatever reason they see, can we now expect Waverley to amend its enforcement policy and adopt a more reasonable enforcement policy where it applies to home extensions and self-built homes, similar to the approach West Berkshire Council have implemented? I have Councillor Townsend down to reply to this, but she's not here. Who is picking this one up, please? Leader.
Yes, so I think we can consider the response placed on the website for noting, as the individual who sent the question isn't here, I can't immediately offer a supplementary, but if they are watching this and wish to ask a supplementary, myself and Councillor Townsend will deal with it swiftly. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you very much, Leader. Questions from Councillor is item 5, which we do not have. So let us move to item 6, ground maintenance contract. I understand that this will be led off by the portfolio holder for environment and sustainability, which is shorthand for Councillor Williams. Councillor Williams, would you like to move the recommendation and then make sure you have a seconder?
Yes, I do believe that I have got a seconder.
Please second, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Councillors may recollect that last year there was an agreement that the outsourced grounds maintenance contract would be extended for 1 year in order to give an opportunity for officers to explore the preferred option of bringing the service in-house. Bringing the service in-house so that we can secure a directly managed and more responsive service, particularly important, particularly significant in the kind of period of rapid change in which we are currently living. So, since that time, that decision has been made, that decision has been agreed, and it does give us the advantages of being more flexible and more responsive, and enables us to move to a greener grounds maintenance service from day one. So, whether or not we bring the service in-house is not the core of the debate this evening. The question that is before us is about approving the capital budget that is necessary in order for us to acquire the tools to do the job. And at the moment, of course, we are funding the equipment and vehicles that are used in the grounds maintenance work for the Waverley green spaces. We fund that equipment and those vehicles through our current spending as we commission our grounds maintenance contract from Crinkles. That is expensive and it is challenging for us as a borough. It is expensive because we are not only paying for the equipment and materials, but we are also contributing to the markup required by Crinkles, our contractor. It is challenging because it needs to be funded in its entirety out of our current spend. So there are significant advantages to funding our equipment and vehicles that are used in our grounds maintenance contract from our capital spending, and that will provide for ongoing cost reductions as we go forward, and cost reductions for our future council, whatever that might be. So the paper confirms that the insourcing of the service can be secured later this year with the flexibility to continue with that ongoing work as we transform into a new authority. And it highlights the benefits in terms of a service that has got the capacity to be more immediately responsive to need, and responsive to need in a time of change. And we do need to bear that in mind, both in relation to the future changes in governance in terms of the development of a unitary authority, but also in terms of any changes which might occur in relation to our towns and parishes. For example, many of our town and parish councils do want to take advantage of our policy of facilitating the asset transfers so that they can take ownership of their local green spaces. So with the ownership, management and care of many of our green spaces transferring to towns and parishes, we will be in a position, as a result of the proposals before you tonight, to manage that process smoothly, a process which would be extremely clunky if it were negotiated by means of a myriad of variations of contract and by further very expensive extensions of the existing contract. So this paper is before full council tonight because there is a requirement for a capital spend. It is a capital spend to acquire the tools and equipment to do the job and do the job more efficiently and more economically as we go forward. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor. Leader, I should have checked with you. Do you wish to reserve your rights, I assume?
I do, Mr. Mayor.
Let me know when you wish to speak. Councillors. Councillor Austin.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I have raised my concerns about the poor quality of the report in front of us tonight to the CEO and the monitoring officer. It is lacking in key evidence we as councillors all need in order to decide on this substantial 1 million unbudgeted expenditure. The report information provided is highly selective and has been framed, I hope not skewed, to lead the reader to try to support the recommendation. There is scant assessment of the key issues, no mention of the alternatives. There is no substantive financial analysis. All of the context is vital. As far as I can see, after spending the £1 million, we are left with pretty much the same costs in-house as we're already paying. Just the Waverley taxpayer is £1 million worse off. Here are some of my concerns. Local government reorganisation is just not addressed in the report. We're talking about £1 million expenditure just prior to the end of this council. On behalf of the taxpayer, this is not prudent or sensible behaviour. Officers tell me they have undertaken an assessment in view of LGR, but why is none of this vital detail in the report? Surely commentary on this should be in every report going forwards. The report should provide detail of what neighbouring councils are doing with their maintenance contracts. We see from the report that Guildford operates its service in-house, but I've since learned Woking has an 18-year contract with Crinkles. What about Surrey Heath? What about Mole Valley? We cannot and should not sign off on £1 million expenditure without understanding the alternative foregone, which is the Crinkles contract, who we understand. They have a good performing contract and they have been working well with the council. There is no explanation provided as to why the executive turned this option down. Further context is missing. Cost of TUPE, for example, that we have no detail of what the in-house costs breakdown is actually going to be going forwards. That would assist us in making our decision. Whatever the non-financial benefits in-house may bring, the report does not justify why huge £1 million capital expenditure is required. Projected in-house operating costs, very similar to the Crinkles contract, demonstrate a marginal saving of £22,000 per year after year one. That would make the payback period 45 years. As there is no financial analysis in this report, I undertook some of my own. A basic NPV, that's net present value calculation, cash flow, tells us that bringing in the house is a far worse deal to the taxpayer, to the tune of hundreds of thousands of pounds. Understanding net present value of the cash flows is the accepted method to analyse and compare income streams of this nature or outgoing streams of this nature. Let's put it in a different way. £1 million divided over the 7-year expected life of the machinery in reality adds an additional £142,000 to the annual costs. I cannot vote for substantial expenditure on the basis of the scant information before me. The report does not address and overcome concerns. I understand there is no embargo currently on these big expenditure items between the 12 Surrey councils, but hopefully this is coming soon. I wonder if that is why we have this item tonight in front of us. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillors. Councillor Clark.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just before speaking on the item, I would crave your indulgence for a point of personal explanation, referring members back to last week's council. Oh, by the way, I don't often apologise. In fact, when I do, it's only to my wife. And for that, I've got a season ticket. But you may remember I made some remarks about the attributes associated with jellyfish. These remarks were a bit fruity. Since then, I've privately apologised to the leader and the deputy leader of the opposition, and I'd like to do that now publicly. Thank you. By following Guildford's example and taking this service in-house, putting the finance to one side for one moment, will give the council increased flexibility and the ability to adapt quickly to changing weather patterns. There is nothing worse than cutting grass that doesn't need cutting and not cutting grass that does. So looking ahead, it will also provide the opportunity for combining the service structure between both Guildford and Waverley councils, to learn from Guildford's experience and to improve this service for our residents. Some have questioned the need for spending such a large sum of money when LGR is on the horizon, but grass doesn't suddenly stop growing where a new unitary takes over. Then they may follow, hopefully, the example of Guildford and Waverley and take this service in-house across the unitary and have the equipment to do much of the work. And of course, I would hope, as part of the forthcoming devolution, that some of this equipment might find its way to Farnham Town Council. In that case, I will be supporting this recommendation. Thank you.
Thank you. I have Councillor Martin, followed by Councillor Hyman.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I endorse the remarks made by Councillor Austin, but I've got a few to add of my own. I have to say I don't support the proposal for a supplementary estimate of £1 million, especially on a budget which we agreed on only a few weeks ago. But it's mainly because I believe that the decision made by the executive on the 11th of March to insource the grounds maintenance service was taken with inadequate information and I think is a flawed decision. We appear to have a contractor in Crinkles that has provided a good grounds maintenance service over the last 4 or 5 years. That's acknowledged in the report. Yet in the dying days of this council, the executive agreed not to renegotiate the contract with Crinkles and to bring the operation in-house and to explore savings with Guildford, none of which is quantified. Now, I must make clear, I have no objection to bringing it in-house in principle. It might well be a good proposal, and Councillor Williams has made some good points. But I would be only happy to accept the proposition if it was shown that there are financial savings and that the service level is unchanged or improved. Sadly, the report that we have and the executive used in their decision doesn't do that. I would expect to see a side-by-side comparison of the costs. And we don't have that. Paragraph 12 of the report shows future expected costs for the in-house operation and historic costs for the Crinkle spend. A decision was made without the relevant and proper information, in my view. More worrying is that the in-house costs, as shown in Table 1 of paragraph 12.1, exclude any allowance for capital costs. Now, I know all of the local government thing. We don't take the capital and we don't do depreciation and all the rest of it. But the fact of the matter is there is council taxpayers' money sitting in the balance sheet as well as that which is used in the Revenue General Fund, and we need to take account of that. And if you do that, we look at the decision that we made for the General Fund only a few weeks ago, which put nearly 1.3 million for the forthcoming year into the Crinkles contract, or a contract to do the grounds maintenance. There's talk about an additional £22,000, which Crinkles would be asking for national insurance increases, takes the budget to 1.31 million. The cost of the in-house operation in year one, according to Table 1 in paragraph 12.1, is £1.319 million, to which, in my view, we must add a further 142,857, being the relevant amount of capital spend, to add to it to get a pari passu comparison with Crinkles. If you do that, this then shows that the in-house costs are way more, and that the in-house costs look to be something like £143,000 more. And that's a serious sum of money. That's the equivalent of 1.2% of council tax. So I think the decision taken by the executive was a poor one, and in my view doesn't represent value for money, especially in the light of local government reorganisation. So I am opposed to the proposition to approve a further 1 million of capital spend, and would recommend that the executive consider their in-house decision. I will be voting against the motion to approve the supplementary estimate, and would urge other members to so do. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Hyman.
Thank you. Before I start, if I may raise a point of order, referring Mr. Mayor to Article 12 of Part 2 of the Constitution, which is the principles of decision making. At 12.2e, it states that all decisions of the council will be made in accordance with the following principles. Point E is that members are fully and effectively supported and advised by officers in exercising both executive and non-executive functions. At point G, it states that relevant matters are fully considered in decision making and nothing irrelevant is taken into account. And point H is that the council's constitution is fully complied with, which it also includes compliance with the law. And we do have, I understand, a legal duty of prudence. Now, I don't believe that those are being followed here. We don't have the information that we need. I did list a page of questions that we can all expect to have the answers to in order to be able to comply with those duties. So I would now ask, please, before I speak, if you would answer the questions we need and provide us with the information so that we can then question it, and we can, rather than have to go to perhaps an amendment or an alternative motion, which I think would be to take it to scrutiny. There's been no scrutiny, there's been no tendering, there's it wasn't budgeted, but despite the fact, obviously, officers and some members must have known about this. At the council meeting, at the budget council meeting, this was written at the time of the budget council meeting. So, we do need that information. And if we can't have that, then I will propose. I don't know whether I've got a seconder. It's not something that I sought to do. Didn't have time for it early today. Some of us have to work, but we do need to make sure this is done properly. We've got a legal duty of prudence here, and this is £1 million of extra spend. And
Okay,
quite honestly, any members who
I get where you're going, Councillor Hyman. You're
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
basically saying that, in your view, there is not compliance with certain clauses in the Constitution which demand that sufficient information is available. That, I believe, is also the contention of the opposition. I do not think it is the contention of the administration or of any of the officers. So I think I will note your concern that it is not being complied with, but if you wish to propose an amendment of any sort, then please do so. One moment.
Through you, Mr Mayor, just to point out that if councillors individually feel that they don't have sufficient information to make a rational decision and that they're not fully informed and can't comply with the decision-making principles this evening, then they should abstain from the vote on the matter. Thank you.
Okay, the floor is yours again, Councillor Hyman.
I really don't think that complies that in all good faith. You, the mayor, can meet your duties in if we take that interpretation. It is up to you to interpret it, but I think you're aware of.
You've raised a point of order. We've discussed it. You now are speaking to the motion.
Okay, thanks. But you are the conscience of the council, and when I hear things like you can abstain if there isn't enough.
Please don't try and insult me. Just get on with talking to the motion.
I do apologise. That wasn't any attempt to insult you as a point of personal information. I'd like to know. I'd like answers to the questions that I've put. Is this an unnecessary extra £1 million of unbudgeted spend for little more than one season? I mean, what on earth are residents going to think of that? Because that's what it looks like. We don't know what's going to happen after 2027. We've only got the 2026 season after October. They do 8 months less, no May. And then we have a dead period for a few months, and that's why it's seasonal, and they take on staff for the period of the 8 months. And that's what we would be doing. We'd be taking on the job of taking on those staff and then sacking them and taking them on and then sacking them, and constantly. It's things we don't know. If we've got all this experience in Guildford, why have we got included in our figures here for IT costs and the rest when our partners have supposedly got it? So, I mean, this doesn't make any sense. I mean, the alternative option of extending Crinkle's contract, where we haven't had a problem with it. I understand we only spent £794,000 last year, well under budget, £500,000 under budget. That's probably because they're not investing in machinery and an uncertain contract. Have we spoken to Crinkles about this? I want an answer to that question. Have we spoken to Crinkles about this? And if I don't get an answer to that, I think I'm going to have to chase that one up myself. If the council considers the proposal to be unnecessary tonight and or excessively costly for residents or unevidenced, unjustified, are we allowed to choose the alternative option? The alternative option isn't in front of us. It was removed. It's on page 20 or something like that of your council papers under the executive papers, but it's not there in front of us. Why is the obvious option of not spending £1 million pointlessly for our residents' money, not ours? Why is that not in front of us? So, you know, I agree absolutely with Councillor Martin. I feel exactly the same way. I'm not in principle against the concept of taking things in-house if there are obvious benefits, and we've got LGR coming up. We've got to try and save money. How is spending extra money in this level for a period of 18 months of the death throes of this council? Why on earth are we looking to spend that sort of money? It just doesn't make sense. So I've asked the question, what am I missing? What am I missing here? I just can't see it. Can anybody explain that? Because you know, I would like to be able to vote for this, but I can't see. How can I justify to residents? The residents are entitled to think that anybody who votes for this is, on the information we've got in front of us, is just completely irresponsible. It's imprudent, and we have a duty of prudence. So, I mean, the questions, I haven't had answers. I mean, we have to trust that we're going to be supported by our officers. We are entitled to be supported by our officers and get answers and get the information we need. And we've got to stop this woking economics, the ways of working of woking that cause all the problems where we can't get an answer in a meeting. And this happens time and time again. Why has somebody not simply addressed and run through and said, hey, look, you're wrong. That's something you've misunderstood. Why can't people do that? So I'm now going to propose, if I would, a motion to defer this to get subject to scrutiny to be brought back to the executive at the soonest possible opportunity after scrutiny by the relevant overview and scrutiny committee, because I really don't think it's responsible to do this to carry on tonight. I don't know whether I've got a seconder. Can I please ask on those terms whether we have a seconder? Thank you.
Could you, for the officers' benefit, repeat slowly exactly what your motion is, and then we'll see if you have a seconder.
To defer this decision so that it is subjected to scrutiny by the relevant Overview and Scrutiny Committee and brought back to the Executive and Council for decision at the soonest opportunity.
Thank you, councillors. Do you have a seconder?
Yes, so Zoe.
Councillor Bartolomas is seconding it. We now have, presumably you wish to speak to it, or do you think you've said enough, councillor? No, okay. I'm told you've had your 4 minutes. But
Sorry,
your seconder may speak, or anyone may speak to the motion.
Sorry, that's not the motion. I can speak to the motion, can't I? I think I get 6 minutes. I won't need all that much, but I think I get 6 minutes to the motion according to the Constitution.
I'm advised by the monitoring officer you do not get another go, but your seconder or anyone else can speak to the motion.
I think that needs checking, please, Mr. Mayor.
Mr. Mayor, my understanding is that as Councillor Hyman was not the proposer of the original motion, Councillor Williams was, that Councillor Hyman gets to speak on his amendment, doesn't he? And Councillor Williams would get a right to reply as proposer of the original motion at the end of the amendment debate.
Mr. Mayor, through you, can I refer members to Council Procedure Rule 15.6, when a member may speak again on a debate, he can speak once on an amendment moved by another member, or to move a further amendment if the motion has been amended since they last spoke. If their first speech was on an amendment moved by another member to speak on the main issue, in exercise of a right of reply, on a point of order, or by way of personal explanation.
Can I raise a point of order on the same clause then? Procedurally, how are we to understand the substance of the amendment if the proposer of the amendment can't move it?
I take the general feeling of council that Councillor Hyman should be allowed to speak longer, so I will exercise some discretion. And Councillor Hyman.
Mr. Mayor,
yeah.
sorry, but that is inconsistent. We did last week with Councillor Austin when she wanted to propose an amendment, and it's inconsistent how we've treated other members. Councillor Austin proposed an amendment last week, and she had to do it at the end of her 4-minute speech.
Yeah.
So you would be giving a benefit to
Okay.
the position.
Right, we seem to have a certain amount of disagreement around the council. Councillor Hyman, generally council seems to feel you are being slightly unfairly treated. So unless council objects, why don't I give you another couple of minutes to make it up to 6, which will allow you to flesh out your amendment, which you've probably already proposed in your speech.
Thanks. I think I also have an opportunity to wrap up as well, but we won't take it
Let
too far.
me deal with the wrapping up bit. You just deal with the unwrapping.
Okay. Okay, let's start now. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yes, my questions and the reasons why we should why I should defer this is because we have no idea of the a lot of the things that we have to know to make an informed decision. If that £1 million is going to cover issues which Guildford have, then we really have got to represent our residents at this point, regardless of how we might be treating things in 18 months' time when we're pooling resources with much less responsible councils than ourselves. So I don't want to be insulting this council, but we have to make sure that as we're saying, you should be looking at what the example we're setting here in collaboration. Where as we go forward with LGR and we want 3 unitaries, we've got to be acting responsibly and not going for woking economics. But really, the issue is here that we haven't had an opportunity, as other councillors, Councillor Martin has said, to be able to look at the alternative, which is to carry on with Crinkles. I haven't had an answer to my question, of course, and I'd still like one from somebody. Please, have we spoken to Crinkles about this? Why should we not wait until our decision on collaboration has been made? Because in the recommendation in front of you at section 3, it says that we should wait until we've got our decision on our collaboration. It is subject to that. So, is there a real urgency for it to be taken today? Can we do it within the next couple of weeks and sort it, make sure it goes through scrutiny? I think we can. What was Crinkle's actual spend? We need to know how much can they do it for? Separate out the revenue and capital spend, because we treat it separately. They don't. We just give them 1.3 million, and this time we're adding £1 million for the sake of 18 months. What's the projected cost of the service compared to that of extending the Crinkles contract? And what period is this covering? 2, 5, 10 years or what? There's so much information. It's all in the questions that I've asked, so much that we need to know.
Can we wind up, please, Councillor?
Well, I'm entitled to plenty more, but yes, thank you very much indeed for the opportunity, Mr.
Okay.
Mayor.
Now, do you wish to speak immediately, a seconder, or do you wish to hold fire? Right. Can I remind councillors and everybody, we are speaking to the amendment, and the amendment is to delay a decision, in fact, throw this forward. So please, we're not necessarily talking about the substance of the initial thing. We are talking about, do we have enough information to make a decision, which is what Councillor Hyman is concerned about. So can we please focus ourselves on that and not re-debate the main motion? Councillor, floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. It seems imprudent that we have agreed to undertake this capital cost of machinery in a context where we are about to cease to exist. I would have thought that there would be a moratorium on such capital expenditure. In any event, in order to be able to vote on this, we need to model the various outcomes together with assumptions underpinning the model in terms of percentage of staff that are 2Ping. I would seek an Excel spreadsheet in Excel spreadsheet form with clear underlying algorithms that show us the model, the assumptions behind the ratio of staff that are forecast to 2P, contemporaneous comparisons with an extension of the current Crinkles contract, and crucially, a comparison with maybe a third way in which we renegotiate with Crinkles to secure more flexibility and without the cost of having to buy the new machinery. I therefore support the deferral.
Thank you. Do any councillors wish to speak to the deferral, or can we take it to the vote? I have Councillor Higgins, Councillor Gale, Williams, you're proposed the original motion. You get to speak at the end. And follows. So Higgins, Gale, and follows in that order.
I'm grateful to Councillor Follows for actually standing up for Councillor Hyman there, because I think it's quite right for him to be able to put forward his amendment and speak to it. In respect to Councillor Hyman's amendment, I do support it. When I was reading through the report, I did feel that this is such a substantial spend that it should be stress tested through overview and scrutiny. There's certain things that I was looking as I was going through it in terms of questions. First of all, there's the financial implications, and it seems to flatline in terms of revenue expenditure, which is impressive considering that pretty much every service and contract increases every year due to inflationary pressures. The other aspect is obviously, you know, service. Will service improve? Well, the service is actually pretty good at the moment. So the main weight of this proposal is environmental benefits, which I fully support. Unfortunately, I don't feel I have enough information here to feel that there will be environmental benefits. There potentially are. There's talk about HVO vehicles and things like that. At 7.1, I think it was, 7.4, the current contractor has recorded emissions of 114 tonnes of CO2. That's a very helpful figure, but there's no direct comparison to what our estimated output would be with the machinery that we'll be purchasing. So I would like to see overview and scrutiny to scrutinise this. It may be a very good proposal, but I would be more comfortable voting on something that's gone through that process. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. I have Councillor Gale, followed by Councillor Follows.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. First of all, I'd say I am in favour of bringing things in-house, but having read this report, as I read through it, I seem to find I had more questions than answers, I'm afraid. And I would like more answers, as Councillor Hyman has said. I think it needs scrutinised, and I think we do need some facts and figures before us. At the moment, I can't see why we would want to spend £1 million, and some of our property and land is going to be hived off elsewhere. So I'd like some facts and figures, please.
Thank you, Councillor. I have Councillor Follows, followed by Councillor Austin.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So a couple of things I will just need to check with officers. It's my recollection, and I need to go and check the exact date, that the original contract discussion on this was something like 9 months, a year ago at council or exec. I need to clarify that. I'm sure between the 10 of us here, one of us will find it in a moment, but this is certainly a subject that has actually been to council before, and if whether this bit or whether the pre-discussion of it last time was eligible for call-in or not. Scrutiny did not do that last time. So as far as I'm concerned, we've got to a point now where we're at a time critical juncture in terms of moving forward with this version of the service. I would suggest that, of course, that post-decision scrutiny is also something that scrutiny functions can also look at. I think the number of recommendations I've had from overview and scrutiny so far on matters is 0. Over the course of the last year and a half or so. And so what I'm just going to use this last 2-3 minutes is just to address some of the other issues that have been made. In my other hat as leader of Godalming Town Council, one of the things that residents appreciate most is the expansion of our grounds maintenance team. And the reason they appreciate that is because, particularly Surrey, have a tendency not to do the work. And when they don't do the work, or if there are other gaps or other issues, we can send a crew out and fix it, usually within the day. And residents can flag it to any of the councillors or any of the Godalming Town Council staff or the clerk by email or anything like that. And they do that and they see it done immediately. And that flexibility is basically the core of what we're after here in terms of what we're after. And I am talking to the amendment, Jerry, and I would really hope that, considering how much I just stood up for you, you'd very much let me finish speaking. Just on the matter of LGR, because that's come up a number of times as well. Unless you take the most barking of Surrey's maps, which had us somehow split up from Guildford, which I have to say were the top end of crazy, the South Surrey proposals, most of the maps have Guildford and Waverley working together. Certainly the front runner proposal for the D&Bs does, and the front runner proposal for Surrey County Council does. Whether Woking or Surrey Heath have contracts at various stages too, that will obviously be something that has to be factored in later. But grounds maintenance will not be the top of anybody's list when we move over into the new unitary. It just won't be. There's going to be millions of other things that are more important. And so having a contract that is actually flexible to deal with the needs and the probably evolving needs of residents and that unitary in the first stages, I think will serve that unitary very, very well. It is also a case that if we need things to, let's just say, for example, we get a growing season that's more, shall we say, more robust than normal. It happens. It means we can deploy teams to deal with more
Councillor, you're
cuts more
kind of
frequently.
straying
Yeah.
into the main topic rather than the fact whether we need to make a decision today.
Well, I think we do need to make a decision today, and I would just remind councillors that pre-decision scrutiny is possible, and I'm quite sure, especially as I've been talking for 4 minutes, in the hope that members might have also found when the last debate was, that we've actually had a lot of this discussion. And I'm pretty sure it also went to scrutiny, and if it didn't, I'm not sure why you didn't ask for it to. And I do think you have to remember that, Jerry, you sent these questions at 20 to 4 day of. You've had quite a long response from Julian despite that. Sorry, Julian Higson, the officer. And it is, I think, quite unreasonable. So considering there has been some level of debate here on this subject before, and you can do post-decision scrutiny, which I would advise you to do if you've got concerns about this, I think realistically there's enough information here to make the decision. And just one final point in my last 9 seconds. The executive have a role at setting a policy position, which is why we determined that the other options were unsuitable. And the executive did that in their papers, which is where those options were. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor. I have Councillor Austin, followed by Councillor Goodrich.
Thank you. Me again. I'm not in principle against bringing it in-house either, but the reasons to do so are just simply not on the public record. They're not in that report. I agree, a big benefit of local government reorganisation, and this contract could be to empower our towns and parishes to have more responsibility. But it's not appropriate that the leader puts us in a position of pressure to make this decision tonight. It's £1 million. We need to make the right decision. I also just want some practical stuff here. The timing of receiving printed reports has been a factor in this for I think, many councillors. For example, the chair of the Overview and Scrutiny committees, who would have called it in, received the printed copies of the papers after the deadline after which they could have picked up and called it in following the exec council meeting. So, you know, you have to be like a superwoman to be able to do all of that. You know, I struggle, I have to say, with the amount of stuff that's going on, and receiving the printed reports, I think was an issue and has been an issue for a number of councillors. Just on this, let's defer this. I just make the point. If you were aware of this 9 months ago and it came to council, why was it not in the budget 3 weeks ago? This £1 million. You know, that's the big question. And I would also, I sent Pedro and Susan, a very long email earlier with all of the reasons, or actually not even all of the reasons, why I feel this report is inadequate. I won't go through all of them. There's no quantitative data. We're not provided a breakdown of any costs. It suggests the recommendation's best value, but provides no data analysis to suggest why. It completely ignores LGR. It ignores what other councils are doing. Anyway, I went on and on and on. But in short, the report is not up to scratch as it stands. If we are expected to make a decision on £1 million of unexpected capital expenditure, I take that responsibility very seriously on behalf of the residents I serve. I'm not against approving the £1 million, but as it stands, I see no reason as to why I should. So I very much would hope that as a council we can come together and support this deferral. Let's scrutinise it and come back, hopefully in the near future, and make an informed decision. Thank you.
Thank you. I have Councillor Goodrich, followed by Councillor Merriweather.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I am supporting the deferral. There's no mention that any negotiations took place with Crinkle. I assume they didn't. But wouldn't it have been helpful to find out if we wanted to extend the contract for a year or 18 months to coincide a little bit more with local government reorganisation, that we find out what the cost would have been? Bearing in mind, as has already been mentioned, that 142,000 roughly of capital has got to be added to our running costs, so to speak, of it, to come to the true cost of what it's costing the council taxpayers. Have we got sufficient officer time to deal with the extra workload for the administration by bringing it in. There's talk of a steering committee or whatever it's called of officers that are going to deal with this. Now, have they all got spare time to deal with this, or are we going to have to recruit another officer or two to run it from ourselves? And has that been costed? What is the breakdown of the cost of, if you like, the fuel and the manpower against the cost of the admin that is going to be necessary in this council? It makes it clear the risk of 2P. I mean, we are all assuming that all these employees of Crinkle are going to say, what a lovely idea to work for Waverley. Now, they may not take that view, and then the expertise and the good service we're getting will go down. Now, all these questions haven't been answered, haven't been stress tested, so far as I'm aware. They must be, because we're spending £1 million in the throes of this council, which is totally irresponsible without having stress tested all the things that need to be tested. And as a side, you know, we've had to work pretty hard on this. We're bearing in mind the papers. I received paper copies. I had to collect mine today because I never had any. And even the main agenda I never got either. And therefore, it's not fair on councillors to be treated this way when important decisions are being made. Thank you.
I have Councillor Merriweather.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm going to have to be careful now to speak just to the amendment because I think a lot of the remarks that we've heard have conflated the amendment with the substantive motion. And in my view, that's probably quite easy to do because I have a lot of sympathy with the procedural side of things, the fact that papers have been late. But in terms of deferring the discussion, what troubles me is a lot of the remarks that have been made about deferring the discussion on the capital expenditure have reverted to second guessing the decision of the executive for the contract as a whole. We are supposed to be talking about just the decision on the capital expenditure. And on that, on that basis, I think we do have enough information to discuss the substantive motion, and I do not think that we should be deferring.
I see no more hands up. So Councillor Williams, would you like to speak? And then I will get Councillor Hyman to sum up. To the amendment, of course.
Okay, yes, speaking to the amendment, Councillor Hyman, I think raises the question, has there been an opportunity, have we spoken to Crinkles about it, he says. Of course, we've spoken to Crinkles. Of course, this has been a process of ongoing negotiation. And indeed, the question was raised that, you know, why has this not been picked up by overview and scrutiny? Of course, overview and scrutiny have had the opportunity to be able to pick this up and to challenge this at any stage. So in terms of some of the comments that have been made, where the debate has sort of strayed into the substantive, the substantive issues, which of course is inevitable because the motion that's being put forward is about delaying the process, delaying a time-critical process and effectively nullifying it. The points were made in terms of the costs of 2P transfer and the costs of capital repayments. Now, can I draw members' attention to the fact that the costs of 2P transfer are included, and specifically included if people read the paper that's before them. And secondly, that the costs of capital repayments are included in the annualised price. So, you know, there is that information there. Now, going back to the fact that the decision has already been been made in relation to moving down the road of bringing the service in-house. I draw members' attention to the executive paper on the 6th of August 2024. The options were put then that included either continuing with the Crinkles contract, which was a 5-year contract, and that was the option that was before us, or temporarily extending the contract in order to mobilise for bringing the service in-house. It was agreed to extend the contract, albeit at a more expensive annualised cost, in order to properly mobilise to bring the service in-house. That choice was made. Crinkles agreed to extend the contract for 1 year only. We are now in a position where there is no anticipation by Crinkles that we will be extending the contract further, extending the contract again. There is no guarantee that that will be feasible or possible. We are committed to a process of bringing that service in-house. And this is time critical. By delaying a decision on the basis of some spurious assumptions about negotiations that have already occurred and information that is actually presented in the paper that you've got before us will not actually help the situation at all. Indeed, the option is there for us today to actually to vote in favour of the substantive motion now, today, or vote against it or abstain today. And I would urge members to actually have the courage to be able to do that.
Thank you. Councillor Hyman, your chance to sum up.
Well, thank you very much indeed, Mr. Mayor. The decision has been made, we're being told, but of course the decision can't have been made because it's not implementable if there's no capital to expenditure, is it? Effectively, that executive decision that was made on the 11th, that decision hasn't been made. It was subject to the capital expenditure that is necessary to implement it. Therefore, the decision there was it's a very funny way of doing business, actually, I think most people would consider, as just a normal residents. This is all open public information. Councillor Williams said, and I quote, "Of course we've spoken to Crinkles." I don't want members to be misled. I spoke to Crinkles myself and they said they haven't been spoken to. Now, Mr. Williams might, of course, Councillor Williams might be speaking in respect of, oh, we spoke to them a year ago, we spoke to them 5 years ago when the contract was in. Of course we did. But no, they haven't been spoken to, so please don't be misled, members. This whole scenario has changed since last August, of course, completely. It was before LGR. There's a lot of information we need, but we've had no answers. The answer to my question, have we spoken to Crinkles? I got the wrong answer. Other questions that I've asked, what's the urgency? I mean, we're just told, oh, this is urgent. Have we not got 3 weeks? I mean, we've got another council meeting booked for April. I don't see any reason why it shouldn't be brought back to that. We don't need a long lead-in period to it. We just need to do this properly. Are members here so against doing things properly? Is this so politicised, this chamber, that we can't do a simple thing properly so that we don't waste £1 million for our residents? I mean, I think that would be shameful, and quite honestly, no, I actually like the idea of bringing things in-house. But to stick to the amendment itself, this is simply about whether it is urgent or not. And members, you've all seen, you haven't had an answer to that question. You don't know how urgent this is. You don't know whether we've got another 3 weeks in which we can make this. I think that's enough. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you, Councillor.
I commend the motion, the amended motion to Council. Thank you.
Is it a point of order or a point of... It can't be information because you haven't spoken.
I'm a bit confused here, Mr. Mayor, because we've been told that the executive have spoken to Crinkles. Councillor Hyman Councillor Hyman has said in his previous speak that he would speak to Crinkles, and he's now just said he has spoken to Crinkles. So this is a bit confusing for the councillors because one of them is not telling the truth.
We can invite them both to give a personal explanation if they want to clarify. If Councillor Hyman wants to give a personal explanation, if he doesn't want to.
Point of personal explanation. I didn't say I hadn't spoken to them. I did ask, should I speak to them? Okay, but I didn't say I hadn't.
To hopefully clarify this point, the Chief Executive will speak.
On a factual point only, I can clarify that we have spoken to Crinkles on a regular basis. The Assistant Director in charge, Marcus Harvey, has spoken to the MD of Crinkles as part of this discussion within the last 6 weeks and on a frequent basis throughout this process. Thank you.
So let us assume there's been a mistake rather than an untruth spoken, and we will now proceed to the vote, please, which will be done in the normal electronic way. Is it a point of order?
Can I ask for a recorded vote, please?
I need 4 others. We seem to have enough for a recorded vote, so we'll have a roll call. Do remember you are speaking to the amendment. Basically, you're saying, do you or do you not wish to delay the decision?
Councillor Atkins,
For a delay.
Councillor Austin,
For.
Councillor Barker Lomax,
For.
Councillor Beeman,
Against.
Councillor Busby,
Against.
Councillor Cavalieri,
Abstain.
Councillor Clark,
Abstain.
Councillor Coburn,
For.
Councillor Crowe,
Against.
Councillor Davidson. Yeah. Councillor Denis. Councillor Fairclough.
Against.
Councillor Follows.
Against.
Councillor Gale.
For.
Councillor Goodridge.
For.
Councillor Hess.
For.
Councillor Higgins.
For.
Councillor Hussaini.
For.
Councillor Hyman.
For.
Councillor Keane.
Against.
Councillor Keel.
Against.
Councillor Lawton.
Abstain.
Councillor Long.
Against.
Councillor MacLeod.
Against.
Councillor Martin.
For.
Councillor Merriweather.
Against.
Councillor Morrison.
Abstain.
Councillor Monroe.
For.
Councillor Nicholson. Councillor Ken Reid. Not here. Councillor Raleen. Councillor Paul Rivers.
Against.
Councillor Penny Rivers.
Against.
Councillor Rubini.
Against.
Councillor Spence.
Abstain.
Councillor Staunton. Councillor Sullivan.
For.
Councillor Ward.
Abstain.
Councillor White. Councillor Wicks. Councillor Williams.
Against.
Councillor White. Councillor White put his hand up. Oh, Councillor Weldon. Councillor Weldon wasn't for.
Councillor Weldon was apparently not for.
Oh, sorry, Councillor Weldon. Against.
That's what I think.
Yes. And two, yes. We have 17 votes for, sorry, 15 votes for, 17 against and 2 abstentions. 6 abstentions, my apologies. So the vote is lost. And we will return to the substantive vote. Councillor Goodrich.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm not going to repeat what I said on the amendment, but it's been, I raised the point when I spoke to say that we don't have a breakdown of the 1.319305 annual cost to the revenue account. The additional detail says revenue expenditure for the first 12-month period of the service, and the costs of 2p transfer are included in the cost provided. Councillor Williams suggested that part of the capital was also included in that figure. I have read the papers, and unless he can point out where the repayment of the capital is included in the 1.3 million, I think he is wrong, with the greatest respect. And it does worry me that we do not have a breakdown of how that 1.3 million is spent, and also that how much of that is the administration of our officers, and do we have the capacity to deal with this? Because I'm afraid there are an awful lot of things where we spent capital or plan to spend capital where we are not expert in that field. And I appreciate we have Guildford officers who can help out, but we have an awful lot of very good officers, of course, but they are not necessarily experts in certain areas. And have we got the necessary expertise in-house to deal with this, and the time and capacity? And if extra administration officers are required, is this included in the 1.3 million? Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Hess, followed by Councillor Merriweather.
I find this all a bit amazing, really. It's the first I've heard about this proposal for putting it out, or bringing it in-house, I should say. What's sort of foremost in my mind is why now? We've got local government reform in front of us pretty soon, probably within a year or two. If you were staff of that grounds maintenance company, would you want to be tupied over to an employer that won't actually exist in a couple of years' time? What if they all opt to go to other contractors and you end up with no staff? Because they're thinking, well, why work for the borough council because it's going to be wound up? Then I'll have to go and get employed by a different local government organisation that gets formed. Don't know if I would. And also, as Councillor Austin pointed out, why wasn't it budgeted? It just makes me feel that we're awash with money. Got £1 million that we can spend as we wish. I tell you what, it annoys me because a couple of years ago, as Mr. Mayor knows, and Councillor Williams knows, I tried to get a £20,000 glutton machine for Farnham to have a lovely clean town. I know he's laughing, but I wanted an immaculate clean town. And we couldn't find £20,000 to make Farnham clean. Walk around it sometime when you come into Farnham. It's actually a bit grotty. Look at all the grime, the detritus, the dog ends that never get cleaned up. In fact, Councillor Follows was there when we put a demo on in Downing Street. So we couldn't find 20,000 for something to make our town clean, but we can find 1 million unbudgeted. It doesn't sit well with me at all, really. I support Jerry. I support members on the other side over there, things that they've said, a lot of figures, technical stuff, way above my head, but it just doesn't seem right. Why wasn't it done years ago? Or why didn't you negotiate a short-term contract extension? Well, yeah, but we're now talking about going forward from this point. Maybe you did then, but going forward from this point, why do we have to bring it in-house and spend £1 million of our council taxpayers' money? It's not our money, it's the community's money. So it should have been budgeted. So it doesn't sit right with me, colleagues. Really doesn't. Thank you.
Was Councillor Merriweather next, wasn't it?
If you say so, Mr. Mayor, right. Yeah, well, as Councillor Hess says, we've got to go from this point forward. This is a proposal that is coming up now after the budget was set. The budget started in motion at the back end of last year. We're already now halfway through March, but as Councillor Clark said, we are in a process now where the grounds are going to need to be maintained, not just for the next 12 or 18 months. The grounds are going to need to be maintained for a long time into the future. And we've heard in some cases, I'm not sure if it's true or not, that Woking have committed to an 18-year contract. Well, we are whatever's happening with local government reorganisation, the grounds maintenance contract is not going to be the first thing that's going to be sorted out by the new unitary authority. And in the meantime, we are still bound. We are still bound by our duty to continuously improve what we are doing and to search for best value. And best value is not always the cheapest price. The best value is delivering on what we've committed to in our corporate strategy, including the climate emergency. And it is what we committed to when we were re-elected 2 years ago at the local elections. So this isn't just about the price of what we're doing. This is about the value that we are delivering for our residents. I'm very grateful to others who've pointed out that by bringing this in-house, we will take back control of our grounds maintenance. That is something that gives us flexibility, and it is something that means that we will be able to have one less problem to deal with as we do the asset transfers that we aspire to in the run-up to the local government reorganisation. Those of us who are familiar with how the private sector works, that comes sometimes at a premium. The capital markets have been working on the basis of control premiums now for at least the last 20 years. I'm grateful for Councillor Martin for reminding us, of the distinction between revenue and capital. Yes, the sums that we pay Crinkles, as they call themselves now, are loaded. Their gross profits are around about 20%. Their EBITDA is around about 10%. So they do recover. They do recover the costs of their capital plus a profit. And we fund that through our revenue funding. This gives us an opportunity actually not only to take back control and deliver the service, but to actually lay the cost of that capital side of the equation out of our capital receipts rather than out of our general fund revenue. So it will relieve some of the pressures, the inflationary and other pressures on our general fund revenue accounts. I think that's probably about it. I'm grateful to Councillor Austin for reminding us all what net present values mean, but of course that's in the context of the private sector here, where capital and revenue are in two completely fundamentally different pots as to their usability. One has to treat those private sector tools with the utmost caution. Thank you.
Councillor Gale.
That came round quickly. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. As I said earlier, I am in favour of bringing work back in-house. However, I just think we don't have an awful lot of information in this document. And I also wonder why we are spending £1 million on equipment when we already know Councillor Clark has said he'd like to see some of that equipment going towards Farnham, because at the moment Waverley are offering to transfer properties out to town councils or even parish councils if you have something in your area. And we've seen the list that Godalming Town Council have their eye on, because that's been across Facebook. Hazelmere, Cranley, I don't know, they're all probably looking at these things. So if that happened in, say, 12 months and all these lumps of land were transferred to town councils, what are we going to cut with all this £1 million worth of equipment which you want us to buy right now? If we buy it right now, it could be, well, sitting idle in 18 months because most of that land will be gone. We all know that the money comes out of different pots, Councillor Merriweather, but it all comes out of one pot, and that's the man in the street. It's his pocket that this money comes out of. We should never forget that, and that's why I think we do need to know a little more about this before we go ahead. As I say, I would willingly bring this in-house. I think it is the best way to manage land maintenance. Surrey have done a dreadful job since they took it back from Waverley. I wouldn't disagree with that at all. But I think we've just got to be careful right now. People know that the councils are going to be moving along and joining others. And I think there's too much unknown right now. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Coburn.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Well, not for the first time. I totally agree with Councillor Gale and in fact with Councillor Hess. And I remain as confused as everybody else about why, if this has been going through the process as an in-depth discussion and whatever, why we're suddenly coming back for a supplementary estimate and it wasn't put in the budget. I just don't get it, and I won't get it, because as far as I can see, if this is being discussed, it should have been budgeted for. So I'm afraid, you know, I'm not satisfied like Councillor Gale. I have read very briefly what the reports say in the time that I've had. I did download it at home before I got the paper copies. I wasn't just relying on that, but we haven't got the detail. It's a supplement, I mean, £1 million. I agree with Councillor Gale. I won't mention the man on the Clapham omnibus because everybody under whatever age, but the man in the street, the man on whatever number bus goes up and down here, that's a person we've got to convince that we are actually doing things that are reasonable and fair. And I am not sure that I can face the public and say, oh, £1 million for a contract now. We don't really know what's going to happen in the future. We don't really know what's going to happen to all these assets that we're buying now, but I'm sure we'll be able to sell them on, or it'll be quite good. It's not good enough. It's not firm enough. And I'm afraid I haven't got enough information to support this at all. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
I see no more hands, so Councillor Follows, would you like to exercise your right as seconder?
I would, thank you. And there's a number of things that have been said tonight. I think there's a wider lesson for council here that business like this is complicated and does take place over the course of effectively multiple different meetings over the course of a cycle. And this did start over a year ago with the discussion of the extension of the contract and for how long. And just to respond to Councillor Hess's first point, it was only extended for a year so that we could accommodate this process. We discussed the concept of bringing things in-house in the corporate strategy. It was outlined very clearly. And of course, there have been umpteen numbers of times for ONS to have proactively called in any part of that discussion, as is their right, or indeed entered select committee mode and asked the portfolio holder for environment or for finance, or indeed me, to come and explain any of the details of it. And of course, none of those options have been taken over the course of the last year or so. Now, I appreciate not everything here is packaged in your report that deals with all of this subject. But of course, council is often more than just one or two meetings. It is multiple long-term planning over the course of a number of years. So one of the things we know fundamentally, and I will just say, Mr. Mayor, the time isn't running, so I feel like I need to ask Democratic Services to yeah, there we go. I know I've only got 3 minutes. Okay. Trying to be fair here. We know the grass will grow. And ultimately, we know that a council has to deal with it, whether it's Waverley or not. And so the idea that this is some kind of sunk cost that somebody else won't have to deal with is you know, I just don't think it's a valid point. And I will address the thing about towns and parishes. Firstly, the sum total of all the land requested or is likely to be requested by all the towns and parishes still leaves an awful lot of land to be managed by Waverley. That's the first thing. And on the second thing, certainly for the first couple of years, even the two biggest towns and parishes in this area, Farnham and Godalming, would still need to subcontract to Waverley Guildford to provide that service. So in the few years that we have left, there would almost be no changes to how our contract management here actually works anyway. There would just be none. All that would be is more flexible and under our control. Because I mean, Councillor Gale has seen as much as me. Surrey are dreadful at their landscape management and their grounds maintenance. This is an area where we know that doing it more local is more responsible to residents and generally better. Budgets, many of you have been here for a while, or you deal with budgets in your day jobs or previous jobs. They change over the course of the year, regardless of what organisation you're in. That's why we have these processes to put in budget variations. And we generally didn't have all of the numbers because of the discussions that we were having over the course of the last year or so with previously Continental, now Crinkles. We now do, so we put a supplementary estimate in. I can assure you, with LGR coming across all of our desks, you will be seeing more of these sorts of things, and not just here, but in every council. We see them all the time at Surrey, by the way, as well, when they don't budget for things. And I'm sure we will be seeing some in the coming financial year from Surrey as well, particularly when the LGR costs start to mount on the Surrey side. George, just particularly, George Hess, my apologies, but I know it was 20,000 would have been the share for the Glutton for that 1 year, but it isn't just about buying some of the equipment. It's about who's going to operate it, how many years, replacement of the kit and things like that, making sure also that Waverley act equitably across the whole borough rather than favouring one town or anybody else's geography in particular. And there was a very clear offer made to Farnham Town Council that we would work with Farnham Town Council to fund either half or some of those costs. And Farnham Town Council didn't agree to do that. And that was a shame, because I think it would have been a good opportunity to use that bit of kit in Farnham Town Centre, about the only place that it would have made sense to do it. And again, I encourage Farnham Town Council to put forward proposals with us on that. I've always been open to doing that with any town or parish that wants to work with us on those things. So what you have here is, in the round, enough information to make the decision. Our officers and our finance portfolio holder are comfortable with the decision, and this is the right thing to do for residents, even with LGR, possibly especially with LGR. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Williams, your time to sum up.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Mayor. And first of all, if I can sort of pick up some of the issues that have been raised in relation to costings, which clearly is of concern to councillors, and understandably of concern to councillors, merely because costings are not actually broken down in the paper that you've got before us doesn't mean to say that those costings do not exist and those financial projections do not exist. What you have before you is a summary of the costings. And in response to some of the queries that have been raised, as I said earlier, TUPE transfer is included, and it's explicitly included in the costs, and that capital payments are included in the annualised price in our revenue costs, which will decrease over the 7-year period. And Crinkle's capital costs are not disclosed in their price, as it is a given that equipment is needed in order for them to do the job. Waverley Borough Council will pay for this expenditure and it will have done at the start of the contract, and the costs are included, and so that is no different. Now, just moving on to some of the other comments that have been made, many members, like Councillor Gale, who spoke in support of Councillor Hyman's motion to delay the decision today, stated their support for bringing the service in-house. Now, given that we need to make the decision now on this capital item, now is your chance, councillors, to demonstrate that support, because the alternative is that we will potentially end up with no capacity to be able to mobilise the service that is required in order to continue our grounds maintenance as a council. Councillor Hess, in his comments, referred to the TUPE arrangements. Councillor Hess needs to understand how TUPE works. Employees moving over to Waverley will move over to local government conditions of service, better conditions of service, and that's one of the things that I would actually be very strong in supporting. But we'll move over to local government conditions of service, which a future local government organisation will also be required by statute to honour. Councillor Hess raised the question, why do we not extend the contract for a further year? We did. That was exactly the process that we adopted in order to enable the mobilisation to take place and in order to give us enough time to be able to go through the process of bringing the service in-house. We have that option on the table now, and I would urge councillors to support it.
Thank you, councillor. We will now move to the vote. Councillor Denis.
I was going to ask for a recorded vote due to the amount of money we're talking about.
Was being past tense. Are you not doing so?
I am indeed, and I'm sure I have a number who will support that.
I only see 3.
No.
Okay, thank you very much. Plenty.
Councillor Atkins,
Against.
Councillor Austin,
Against.
Councillor Barker-Lomax,
Against.
Councillor Beeman,
For.
Councillor Busby,
For.
Councillor Cavalieri,
Abstain.
Councillor Clark,
For.
Councillor Coburn,
Against.
Councillor Crowe,
For.
Councillor Denis, Councillor Fairclough,
For.
Councillor Follows,
For.
Councillor Gale,
Against.
Councillor Goodridge,
Against.
Councillor Hess, Councillor Higgins,
Abstain.
Councillor Hosseini,
Against.
Councillor Hyman,
Against.
Councillor Keane, for. Councillor Keel,
For.
Councillor Lawton,
Abstain.
Councillor Long,
For.
Councillor MacLeod,
For.
Councillor Martin,
Against.
Councillor Merriweather,
For.
Councillor Morrison,
For.
Councillor Munro,
Against.
Councillor Nicholson, Councillor Raleen, Councillor Paul Rivers,
For.
Councillor Penny Rivers, for. Councillor Rubini,
For.
Councillor Spence,
For.
Councillor Sullivan,
Against.
Councillor Ward,
For.
Councillor Weldon, Councillor White, Councillor Wicks, and Councillor Williams.
For.
Thank you.
Councillors, 21 in favour, 14 against and 3 abstentions. The motion is therefore carried, and we move on to item 8. I believe this is a motion by Councillor Williams.
I do apologise, Mr. Mayor, and I believe I have a seconder in Councillor Spence.
Thank you very much. Councillor Spence, a second. Please speak to your motion.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. We raised this question again before the council because this is an issue which is very current and which is shortly coming to Rushmore Borough Council for decision in terms of the planning application. So plans for the expansion of Farnborough Airport just over the border in Hampshire include increasing the airport's annual weekend flight limit from just less than 9,000 to just less than 19,000 flights, and upping the annual flight limit from 50,000 to 70,000. Now, we know that of the private jet flights to and from the airport in 2024, most of them to European destinations carried an average of 2.5 passengers per flight. Some of the flights carrying no passengers because the aircraft were travelling to pick up customers. So each passenger on that basis is responsible for roughly 9 times as much carbon emissions as they would do on a flight to the US. So for the limited benefit that that provides to a small number of people, private aviation has a disproportionately large impact on climate change due to its high carbon emissions. So essentially, I'm moving this motion for 2 reasons. First, we know that the expansion of Farnborough Airport will adversely affect residents from a wide area across Waverley in terms of noise, air quality, and nuisance. It will particularly, though not exclusively, impact on residents living in the West, and I know Councillor Spence will say more about this when he speaks to this motion. However, given the nature of the flight paths, residents from many areas across the east of Waverley will be affected too. And the second reason for moving this motion is, of course, that Waverley Borough Council has declared a climate emergency. We know that aircraft carry a massive carbon footprint, and I would argue that any airport expansion is unacceptable in a climate crisis, although that's not the issue for debate this evening. It is, to me, very clear that there is no justification, whatever, for example, your position on Heathrow expansion, there is no justification for an elite private airport where you can charter an entire aircraft built for 150 passengers to carry just your family or even your pet. And it's quite instructive to look at the Farnborough Airport website. It makes clear on the website, and I quote, "Our dedicated pet travel scheme simplifies the journey of your pets in and out of Farnborough Airport without the need for quarantine. So you can use up as much carbon footprint as the average family in a whole year to bring Fido across to join you in your villa in southern Italy. So what is happening now is that planning permission is being sought from Rushmore Borough Council. We are not the planning authority in Waverley, and that is entirely a decision, of course, of Rushmore Borough Council. But I do believe that there are strong planning grounds for rejecting that application. And should Rushmore Borough Council throw out the planning application, and should Farnborough Airport mount an appeal, I would like to be able to enter into a dialogue with senior councillors and officers in Rushmore in order to explore what we could do to help, as Waverley residents have a stake in stopping this expansion. This motion will enable us to do just that, and I would urge councillors to support it.
Councillor Spence, do you wish to speak now or reserve your rights?
I'll defer. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other councillors wish to speak? Councillor Monroe and Councillor Coburn.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. As I think most people will know, as I think most people will know,
What's he doing?
am I okay? I am this council's representative on the Farnborough Aerodrome Consultative Committee, which is a consultative committee which consists from airport representatives and local councillors, residents group. It's not a campaigning group. I thoroughly support the principle behind this motion. I have already said, as have so many people already in this chamber, made an individual response vehemently against any expansion of Farnborough Airport. Many of us, in fact, think it ought to be much smaller than it is rather than larger, especially at weekends where the irritation and stronger of residents perhaps is at its most acute. I am worried, however, about some of the phrasing in this motion. If I were a member of the planning committee of Rushmore Borough Council, I would be pretty cheesed off actually by reading this, because it rather, I'm afraid, criticises them and insinuates that they are likely or possible to determine this application not on planning reasons, but on reasons for public pressure. And we, as a planning authority, would not like to be accused of that. And I think Rushmore Borough Council will also, as I said, be rather cheesed off. I would go further, actually. I think we ought to trust our fellow councillors in the area, and we should trust Rushmore Borough Council actually to determine the application on planning grounds. And goodness knows there are enough planning grounds, and I agree with Councillor Williams on this, there are enough serious planning ground to refuse the application. So I'm sorry that the insinuation has been made. I will support this now because of the underlying reasons, community reasons for this, but I just wish this motion had been expressed a little bit better and a little bit more likely actually to garner support for Rushmore Council. We all know, of course, that if it's anything like the previous planning application, I think in 1974, this is not the end of the matter. The likelihood is that Rushmore will refuse it. It will then go to appeal. We don't know what the appeal will go, and it will be decided in the Lord knows when by the Secretary of State. So this is just the first opening skirmish in what's going to be a very, very long battle. I'm also slightly worried, since we are in this, I'm afraid, for the long haul. We've got to be very careful indeed, very careful indeed, not to rack up costs unnecessarily and not get any benefits. So there we go. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, councillor. I have councillor Coburn followed by councillor Follows.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I mean, I oppose to this for so many reasons. I think it's one person's view of Farnborough Airport. A lot of us live a lot closer to Farnborough Airport, and I fully understand the difficulty of some people living under the flight path. But you have to say that Farnborough and Aldershot are not exactly wealthy in terms of towns. And Farnborough Airport and all the ancillary development around it is vital to the town of Farnborough. I don't know how far, and that is why I agree totally with Councillor Munro. It's entirely up to that borough to sort this out. I don't see why we are saying anything at all about it, quite frankly. And in the tone that was delivered by Councillor Williams, I think was quite frightful. Apart from anything else, I don't wish to be associated with people who automatically hate anybody who's got any more money than they have. I mean, if people have got private aeroplanes, good for them. You know, I haven't got one, but good for them. And if people want to fly their pets out and they've got the money, good for them. You know, what is there with all this jealousy and this sort of attitude towards anybody who does something in a way that we can't afford to do? I'm sorry, the airport is a good employer. There are problems with it. I'm not debating any of that, but it's not for me to sort out. It is for the people of that borough and the committee of that borough. I just think this is hot air in every sense of the word. I mean, we're supposed to be cutting back on it, but I think, you know, we're adding to it with this. I think we've seen far too many of this sort of motion coming into council when we're all tired. We've all been here week after week after week, and we have to stand here with a load of words that, quite frankly, I agree, are insulting. If I were a member of the planning at Rushmore, I really would be, yes, angry, to say the least. So I'm afraid I think this is ill-judged, poorly presented, there for the wrong reason. I think there's an issue with Farnborough Airport. I think Rushmore will deal with it. I think we as individuals, I've been to the airport, I'm sure other people have, to see how it works. In fact, the first time I went, I complained about the early morning flights. And then the CEO pointed out they don't open till 8 o'clock. So all those flights going over the Bourne at 7:30, nothing to do with Farnborough Airport. The trouble is we have so many airports just near Farnham, we've no idea where they're coming from. And the ones from Gatwick and Heathrow, depending on the wind and the weather conditions, sometimes come very low over Lower Bourne, I can tell you. So, you know, to me, this is ignorant, it's ill-phrased. And quite frankly, I would rather just get on, as I did last time, and just say the vote be put, but perhaps we better give people a little more chance to vent their spleen. But I'm sorry, I really think this is the worst kind of motion, doesn't show this council in a good light. And I really think we should stop just having these, what I call political motions at the end of very long meetings, or at least a very long series of meetings. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, councillor. Councillor Follows, followed by councillor Clark.
If I understood that correctly, I think if you've got enough money, you should be able to do whatever you like and damn the consequences. And of course, there are limits to that, because we're all supposed to be reasonable, rational people in a society of laws that stop money or any other particular wishes of anybody or any small groups or people harming the general public in any way. Those restrictions are effectively there as moral principles in our society. I think that our council has every right to speak up in the same way that a town or parish planning committee has the right to speak up on something that impacts, even though it's not the decision maker. I think the principle is effectively extended to, in this case, our border, talking about a subject that not only impacts residents already in our borders, but also impacts Guildford's borders. And it impacts it with noise, but also pollution, because of course the type of flights that we're talking about here operate at the lower altitude levels for flights of this nature. You only need to look at the scale and diversity of the groups opposed to this. And to be honest, how often do you see residents of the Western Commons division parts of Farnham and others allied with Extinction Rebellion, for example. It's a very interesting mix of people, the Farnborough Noise Group. Many of them came to a session that we hosted at the UCA last week with the Guardian's energy correspondent, and that group of people asked a great many questions, and they were a very diverse community. I am quite happy, frankly, even though I'm going to be heading to Chelmsford after this meeting, I'm quite happy to sit here and talk about these things, because I know it bothers hundreds, perhaps thousands of residents in our borough, let alone the ones around us. And I'm okay with sitting here talking about that, even if it takes a little bit more of my time, in that that's what I was actually elected to do. I preceded Councillor Munro as the Waverley rep on the consultative group. That's a very difficult group. And, you know, Councillor Munro knows he has my sympathies on that, because it's very difficult getting answers out of them. My favourite one is that they call themselves a sustainable airport. And by any measure, that phrase is laughable. I think to any normal human, generically speaking, the running of an airport and flights is very clearly not a net zero activity. Bearing in mind that Farnborough classed the flights as scope 3, because of course they're not the flight operators, are they? They sell them fuel as well, but that's a separate business completely. And then the airport itself, because it's got solar panels and is a, honestly fairly energy efficient building, and they run little electric vehicles around it, that means they're a net zero airport, and that's all over their website. And they use sustainable aviation fuel, which I haven't got time to go into how mad that is as a concept. But trust me, that's one of the more ludicrous examples of greenwashing that exists currently in this country. As many airport expansions of late, though, this will be framed as a debate between growth and the environment. But this is not Gatwick or Heathrow. And where I think some of those economic points on growth might at least be vaguely valid, this is the sort of airport that is predominantly for the very wealthy. The impact upon the rest of society from these actions of the very wealthy is exactly the sort of things that a civilized society is supposed to curtail, so that there is harm to the majority because of the work and impact of a minority. That is not jealousy, that is not anti-democratic, that is a borough council potentially expressing opinion to try and prevent harm to our residents, and to express that correctly as a planning objection. I have absolutely no problem with that under those circumstances. These also, as we've mentioned, is some of the highest CO2 per capita of any types of flight that exist, assuming that they actually are human capita on the plane, as opposed to some other form of capita on there too. But as I said at the beginning, these also operate a far lower flight level altitude than many of the flights that we're talking about. So they have a disproportionate level of impact when it comes to noise and particulate pollution, as has been demonstrated multiple times by the Farnborough Noise Group, who, by the way, as well as being concerned residents, are also some of the most qualified people you could talk to on this. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. I have Councillor Clark, followed by Councillor Hosseini.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And thank you to Councillor Williams for explaining why I can hear a dog barking at 7 o'clock every single morning. When TAG Aviation took over this airport from the Ministry of Defence, flights were limited to 28,000 per annum. Then, after government interventions, and we may not see the last of them, in 2008 and 2011, this limit grew to 50,000. In 2019, the airport was bought by Macquarie Infrastructure, and I quote, to further develop our business aviation offering, a thin disguise for the private jet expansion that we are soon to witness. In 2020, a number of new flight paths were introduced, and in some areas of Waverley, which previously had 5 to 10 flights a day, this saw an increase of tenfold. Clearly, the owners of the airport justifiably want a return on their investment by capitalising in the boom in private jet travel. So they are seeking planning permission for a massive increase in flights, as well as a second terminal building. The private jet industry emits all sorts of PR to try and overcome objections to the expansion of this type of travel. One of their favourites is an attempt to disguise private jet flights as somehow being mainly business essential travel. But then you discover that out of the 10 most popular routes in Europe, 6 of them involve trips to the south of France or the Swiss Alps. You realise that calling this business travel is quite laughable. Between 2020 and 22, the top 10 European routes accounted for 20,000 flights. 15,000 of them were to the south of France or Switzerland. In 2022, the UK topped the table for carbon dioxide emissions produced by private jets within Europe, with 500,000 tonnes of CO2 produced by private jets that took off 90,000 times from UK runways. But putting pollution to one side for a moment, the proposed doubling of weekend flights has enraged many who wish to relax in their gardens over the weekend. The proposed doubling of weekend flights will result in more over the 2 days of the weekend than previously flew across the entire week, and are now proposed to start at 7 a.m, not 8 a.m. So no need to set my alarm. With an average, as Councillor Williams said, of 2.5, let's call them 3 passengers per flight, I will have more people sitting in my garden as they fly overhead. Admittedly, not at 7 in the morning or 9 o'clock at night. So members of the council, as I said over a year ago, on your marks, jet set, no.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Hussaini, followed by Councillor Austin.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I speak today to reaffirm Waverley Borough Council's strong opposition to the proposed expansion of Farnborough Airport. The issue was debated in depth last year at full council, and at the time, councillors made their position clear. They opposed the expansion, and their decision was made after weighing up the environmental, economic, and social factors at play. Let us be absolutely clear about what the expansion means. Farnborough Airport is a hub for private aviation, not a commercial airport serving the general public. The proposed increase in flight numbers will primarily benefit a small, select, wealthy elite while imposing significant costs on nearby communities. The environmental impact alone should give us all pause for thought. This expansion would result in more noise pollution, more emissions, and a greater burden on our local environment. At a time when we as a council are all striving to reduce our carbon footprint and promote sustainability, allowing an increase in private jet usage is entirely contradictory to our climate commitments. Now, in the interest of balance, I would like to note that the CEO of Farnborough Airport recently announced a landmark deal that would provide the airport with 12.5 million litres of sustainable aviation fuel, produced locally from waste products. This would mean Farnborough Airport would become the first and only airport in the world to be offering fuel with a 20% blend of sustainable aviation fuel across its entire supply by 2028. Now, this is double the UK government's own target of 10% by 2030. And I think, as Farnborough Airport has been slammed a lot tonight, I think they should at least be commended for taking some steps in the right direction to reducing their and cutting down their emissions. But at the same time, more flights means more pollution, and even with 20% SAF, that's going to be still a massive increase in pollution. Now, while some people might argue that economic benefits to our borough, it is important to point out that unlike commercial aviation, which supports local businesses and creates jobs through tourism and transport links, private aviation serves a very narrow demographic. The expansion will not lead to a boom in employment opportunities to our residents, but instead contribute to worsening air quality and noise pollution, particularly in the areas surrounding the airport. In summary, I will borrow a famous slogan from a former Labour MP. I stand for the many, not the few. I see the prospect of Farnborough Airport expansion as something that will benefit a select few, not the many people of our borough. And so I will back this motion to oppose Farnborough Airport expansion. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Austin, followed by Councillor Parker Lomax.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think it's really refreshing to see the range of comments being made from all of the political spectrum tonight. But I query why we are debating such a very similarly worded motion on yet the same issue only 13 months after the first time. Waverley Borough councillors have already responded decisively with their view on this issue. The application window closed, consultation window closed some time ago, and we have no control over the decision of a planning committee, and nor should we. And I would like to just echo the comments of Councillor Monroe, who very sensibly made that point. We should respect the impartiality of that planning committee now and let them analyse the data and get on with their work. We note, and I stand by, Waverley's submission of an objection way back in early 2024. So I would say to the leader, our council does have a right to speak up. Oh, we already did. We've already discussed this motion. I think just generally on Farnham, we must recognise that the employment and business opportunities that Farnborough brings, it is a major employer in the area. But I also recognise the application to expand Farnborough in its current form comes at too great a cost, I think, for local people and the environment, which is what I said 13 months ago. The proposed increases in flights is too great and will detrimentally impact those under the flight path, especially those in Churt and other western villages and areas of Farnham. The application, I'm not going to go through the detail of exactly what I said last year, but it's too much, the wrong hours, the extended hours are too long, and I suspect it will go straight to appeal and it will be determined by an inspector. So, sadly, I'm not nuts on the tone of some of the wording in this motion, I have to say, and I do find some of it a little bit offensive. But generally, I do agree that the current application is not balanced correctly. And I support the impartial judgment of Rushmore Borough Council. So that I was going to vote for it, but having listened to the debate in the room, I suspect I will be abstaining, because I do agree that the wording in some of this motion is just a little bit too inflammatory and not respectful. And so I do feel sorry, it's a motion for a press release. Thank you.
Councillor Parker Lomax, followed by Councillor Long.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Given that the development of the airport could create many local jobs and tens of millions of pounds of growth for the local economy, our motion should, in my opinion, acknowledge the fact that we are choosing to walk away from the potential for local job creation and local growth engendered by development at the airport. Our constituents care about the environment, but they also care about jobs and growth.
Councillor Long, then I have no more, and we then have Councillor Merriweather.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. At a time of climate emergency, it seems to me to be unconscionable to permit the expansion of an airport dedicated to private jets, which creates such disproportionate carbon emissions per passenger. It's not about jealousy, it's about standing between our residents and a detriment to them from which they cannot afford to derive any benefit. As Ward Councillor for Elsted and Pembrokeshire Harrow, I'm mindful that the residents that I represent are deeply concerned by the threatened expansion of Farnborough Airport with its consequent increase in noise and pollution, and I will be supporting this motion. Thank you.
Councillor Merriweather.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. It's just thrilling to see generally a political discussion this evening, bearing in mind what happened earlier. So, I have to say, Councillor Austin and Councillor Hussaini have stolen my thunder, because I agree with a lot of what they said, except for the fact that I don't think this is something that one can in all conscience abstain on. You're either for this or you're against it. Councillor Coburn, I also agree with a lot with what you said. I think, you know, within reason, people who have wealth should be allowed to deploy it as they see fit. My only concern with that, as a Liberal, that is that they should bear the cost of that, and the cost here is our environment. The residents here have to put up with the noise. They had to put up with the pollution, and all that goes with it. And Councillor Barker Lomax, I'm afraid to say, if Macquarie have got anything to do with it, not a lot of wealth is going to be left in this area, probably not even in this country, based on their prior performance. So in all conscience, language aside, on principle, I am going to be voting for this motion.
Councillor Hess.
Well, while I support the right of anybody with the cash to travel private, I wouldn't take that right away from anybody. It is a business airport, and I'm sure that a lot of the people that fly in are actually coming into this country to do deals, to do business, to support our economy. So I'm not a total detractor from private aviation, period. I think there are abuses like the pet travel scheme. That's not business travel. And also, if you investigate the destinations, they tend to be to sort of winter sports destinations during the winter and sunnier Mediterranean destinations during the summer. So it does question whether it's truly a business airport, but that's an aside. So I don't resist that, but what I do resist is this huge expansion, as was said earlier, from I think 8,900 to 18,900 over the coming years. It's too much. We're already experiencing quite a lot of jet movements above our homes in and around Farnham and the villages. And to see that over doubling in the coming years is really unacceptable. I have to say, in fairness to Farnborough Airport Limited, they did a very good consultation earlier in the process, putting their case. So we are where we are now with it, with Rushmore, and supporting what was said earlier by Councillor Munro, I think we have to respect their role as the local planning authority to determine this. And what is worrying me about this proposal is paragraph 3, that this council requests the Assistant Director, Legal Services and Information Governance, that Waverley Borough Council's legal team explore potential legal avenues for challenge the expansion of Farnborough Airport, including judicial review or other appropriate legal mechanisms. Now, I'm afraid that paragraph makes me unable to support this, because I think that's interference. And why should our legal team, which is already over demand, too much pressure on it, and there will be more and more pressure with the LGA coming up, to have to get involved in another local planning authority's business? I don't understand that one. I think we should keep our fingers out of it and let Rushmore do the work that they're rightfully tasked to do. I just don't see why Waverley should get involved in this. Seems wrong. So, you know, with that in there, I wouldn't support it. So thank you very much for listening.
Councillor Goodrich.
I thank Councillor Hess for saying exactly what I was going to say. in that I am concerned about spending money or officer time. I'm in favour of the sort of theme of the motion of objecting and expressing concern and so on. But I'd like an assurance that no money will be physically spent on any legal proceedings whatsoever without it coming back to us and so on. For us to enter judicial review proceedings in somebody else's authority does seem grossly impertinent to me. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, could I just clarify with the proposer of the motion that the clause about the legal team isn't actually in the resolution that's being proposed tonight? It seems from the motion that the resolution being proposed is the last 6 or 7 bullet points on the motion before you.
I think. Do you want me to?
I think the council needs to be clear what is being
Respond-
proposed that you resolve this
Yeah.
evening.
Do you want, Mr. Mayor, do you want me to respond to that?
There seems to be a lack of clarity about what is in the motion. I'm looking at page 5. Where it
bullet
says,
point
can I
three-
just
sorry.
speak? Where it says council resolves to, and there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 bullet points underneath. Is that the entire motion, I think is the question.
No, Mr. Mayor, may I clarify, Mr. Mayor?
Please.
The entire motion, there is a section where council notes environmental impact, benefits and costs, climate commitments. There is also there are 2 other sections to that which incorporate actions, and the 3rd bullet of the under this council states that there is a request of the Assistant Director, Legal Services and Information Governance, that the legal team explore legal avenues for challenging the expansion of Farnborough Airport, including judicial review or other appropriate mechanisms. It's not prescriptive as to what legal mechanisms, but it does enable that possibility to occur.
Right, that's not what your, I'll come to you in a sec, Councillor Coburn. I know you, that's not what your motion starts at the bottom of the page and says council resolves. Everything above that is informative. So I'll take Councillor Coburn's point and then we'll come back to that.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor, because after resolves, it says to communicate the text of this motion, which is the bit above, there's no other bit it can be, and the people below are just the ones who are going to get it. You know, so, you know, we haven't got a motion if you just take the 6 bullet points, whatever number of bullet points at the bottom. And so that's what we're objecting to, is that chunk that says this council opposes, and then many of us object to bits of it and can't support the whole thing. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Through you, Mr Mayor, it might be appropriate to invite Councillor Williams to just make a minor amendment, which council might be happy to approve, that where it says council notes right at the top of the motion, it should be that council resolves to note the following, so that the resolution applies to the whole motion rather than the resolution just being the last 7 bullet points. One point I would make, though, that you're asking council to make a direction to the Assistant Director of Legal Services and Information Governance. That officer reports to the head of paid service, and it would be a decision for the head of paid service rather than for council. So again, perhaps it should be an amendment that council wishes to ask the head of paid service to consider instructing the OD of legal to take that action. Thank you.
I'd be happy to accept those amendments.
Okay. So that seems to make sense. Councillor Spence then, as seconder.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. 13 months ago, this council passed unanimously a very similar motion that opposed, and I'm going to stress the word, the expansion of Farnborough. Some of the councillors have talked about that we are opposing all of Farnborough. This is about opposing this expansion. Let me try and address some of the points. First of all, I think Councillor Munro and others, I take your point that that Rushmore Borough Council are responsible for making the decision on planning grounds. I would really like this motion to be unanimously approved. So if it would be possible, I would suggest that an amendment to the second bullet point, which says expresses support for the campaign opposing the expansion and calls upon Rushmore Borough Council to reject, and I'd like to add, for planning reasons, the planning application. I believe that's implicit in what we're saying, but if that helps members support this motion, I would like to propose that as an amendment.
Sorry, could you just repeat where you wanted that put, Councillor?
I would like that put under, it says, and calls upon Rushmore Borough Council to reject for planning reasons the planning application.
Does your proposer agree?
I'm looking at my proposer now.
Yes, I would agree to that. It makes it more explicit, and I know some councillors had some concern that it was not explicit, that we were talking about planning grounds for refusing the planning application. Of course, it makes it absolutely clear.
Would you like to continue for the moment, Councillor Spence?
Yes, thank you for that. I'll just try and address some of the others points that came up here. Councillor Austin, I think you accurately said, why do we need this motion now when we had a motion just over a year ago? As we've discussed, the application is still awaiting determination by Rushmore. We think it may be coming closer, but it's over a year ago, and an awful lot has changed in that time. Net zero, the climate change, that is under threat like never before. We all know that President Trump has pulled the US out of the Paris Agreement, and some in the Conservative Party, and I'm very glad to say, not from what I hear tonight from those in this chamber, are aping reform and openly questioning climate change and the 2050 net zero targets. And the government's commitment itself has been questioned. The government is becoming increasingly airport friendly. We know the Chancellor is looking to expand Heathrow and a second runway at Gatwick. Thirdly, planning protections are under threat. So the government has already set out plans that the planning system can be changed and reduce the role of statutory consultees. Farnborough have been watching all of this and changing the mood music. we need to remind them where we stand, that for our residents, particularly those who are over the flight paths, already suffering the pollution, that we stand up and we oppose this expansion. So I would hope, and I'd urge members to support this motion.
Thank you. Councillor Williams. The end game.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I've got one or two notes on one or two points that have been made, and I'll try and be as brief as possible. I think Councillor Spence's amendment deals with the some of the legitimate concerns that have been expressed by Councillor Munro, by Councillor Austin and Councillor Hess regarding the notion that in some way we were telling Rushmore Borough Council what to do, or we were suggesting that Rushmore Borough Council should be rejecting the proposal on something other than planning grounds. So I think we have.
Councillor, could I just stop you for 1 second? Sorry about that. In that some alterations to the motion have been put forward, I'm advised that we do need the consent of council to accept those alterations. It's not, unfortunately, just allowed to you. So, councillor, do you consent to accept those alterations? Thank you. Sorry, Councillor Williams. Floor is yours again.
Thank you. And now that I think that has been dealt with, if I can just make one or two comments on some of the points that have arisen during the debate. Councillor Hosseini, very passionately and very articulately presents that. Presents the case for opposing something which is abominable in our own backyard. However, I would just sort of take exception with the point that he makes with regard to sustainable aviation fuel. Sustainable aviation fuel is at a very early stage of development. It is an unproven technology. It is 5 times more expensive than conventional jet fuel. And like HVO, because it is made from non-petroleum feedstocks, its production on current projections can't be indefinitely extended. So it's not, it's not a long-term indefinite solution. It is used as an excuse by a private airport to justify their existence. Councillor Barker-Lomax talked about jobs and growth. The impact on jobs and growth locally would be very limited. And what kind of jobs and what kind of growth do we actually want to support in a climate emergency on our doorstep? It's not labour intensive and it will provide very little benefit to those living within the location of Rushmore or Eastern Waverley. Councillor Hess raised the point about judicial review. If we support this motion because of the impact on Waverley residents, it's not impertinent, as Councillor Goodrich suggested, to support judicial review. We have already done this. We actually appeared as a Rule 6 party in the judicial review following Surrey County Council's turning down the proposal to drill for hydrocarbons in our own backyard in Dunsfold. So that I think is a spurious argument. Councillor Coburn, I'd like to thank you for your intervention in terms of council procedures, and I was very grateful of the benefits of your experience. But in regard to the points that Councillor Coburn made, in relation to the suggestion that it is okay to fly your pet to your villa in southern Italy if you have the money, I would say that perhaps this is to be expected from a councillor who once explosively articulated that Councillor, and I quote, Councillor Williams has to understand that climate change is not for everyone. It is for everyone. There
I
are
mean,
strong
could we wind
climate
up before we
ground
get any more
change
insults
grounds for
flying,
this.
please?
It was not intended as an insult. It was a comment on a statement that was made by Councillor Coburn. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Right, let's go to the vote. I don't see any hands up.
Could you just, sorry, could you keep your hands?
I need a few more. I am quite short-sighted and I only see 3.
Bear with.
Sadly, we have managed to find 5. We'll have a roll call.
So Councillor Atkins has left the meeting. Councillor Austin.
Abstain.
Councillor Barker Lomax.
Abstain.
Councillor Beeman.
4.
Councillor Busby.
4.
Councillor Cavalieri.
4.
Councillor Clark.
4.
Councillor Coburn.
Against.
Councillor Crowe.
4.
Councillor Davidson. Not here. Councillor Denis. Councillor Deuce. Not here. Councillor Earwaker. Not here. Councillor Fairclough.
4.
Councillor Follows.
4.
Councillor Gale.
4.
Councillor Goodridge.
Abstain.
Councillor Hess.
4 with reservations.
Councillor Higgins.
Abstain.
Councillor Hosseini.
4.
Councillor Hyman.
Abstain.
Councillor Keane.
4.
Councillor Keel.
4.
Councillor Lawton.
4.
Councillor Long.
4.
Councillor MacLeod.
4.
Councillor Martin.
Abstain.
Councillor Merriweather. Councillor Mirrlees, not here. Councillor Morrison.
4.
Councillor Monroe.
4.
Councillor Murray's not here. Councillor Nicholson. Councillor Reid. Oh, they're not here. Councillor Raleen has left the meeting. Councillor Rivers.
4.
Councillor Penny Rivers. 4. Councillor Rubini.
4.
Councillor Spence.
4.
Councillor Staunton. Councillor Steiger is not here. Councillor Sullivan. Against. Councillor Townsend's not here. Councillor Ward.
4.
Councillor Weldon. Councillor White has left the meeting. Councillor Wicks. Councillor Williams.
4.
Thank you.
Very well, councillors. The tally is 26 votes in favour, 2 against and 7 abstentions. The motion is therefore carried, and I think that is the end of the seat. Councillor Coburn.
Sorry, Mr. Mayor, I just wanted clarity for next Tuesday. Have we actually got next Tuesday off, Mr. Mayor, please?
To the best of my knowledge, yes. It's probably executive, is it? But however, you might get called in on Wednesday. Right, councillors.